Thank you. We will have a short introduction from all speakers, and then after that we will have a Q&A. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand or type in the chat. So our first speaker today is Josip Milicevic from Croatia. He has a master's degree in political science. He works as a Secretary General at Croatian Youth Network, which is the Croatian National Youth Council. He has had activist experience in many different topics, but primarily he has been working on youth issues for a long time. So, Josip, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian, and hello to everyone from rainy Zagreb. As you can probably hear by my sore throat and my nose, that the weather is really terrible in the last couple of days. But I'm sure you also didn't join here to listen about the weather forecast, so I'm gonna get right on the topic of the youth participation and young people in general in Croatia. I'm gonna share a small PowerPoint just to make it a bit more. Yeah, I think you can see it right now. Just so maybe it's easier for all of you to keep a track of. The idea is that I shortly present to you what's it like being a young person in Croatia, what are the opportunities for participation, and how does it all turn up in reality. And also, since some of you are not from Croatia, I just added a little introduction on how do we look on the young people and what is their position in Croatia. So in Croatia, young people are considered all those aged between 15 and 30. According to the census from 3 years ago, that's about 16% of total population in Croatia, and similar to the most of the other countries in the Europe, and especially in European Union, we are also dealing with this demographic shift where there is less and less of young people. Of course, as in other countries, young people are heterogeneous group, especially with such a widely defined age group. So you still have people who are attending formal education, high schools, but then you have people who are either entering labor market or going to the universities. And I mean, as you can probably all imagine, it's a big difference in your life priorities when you are 19 and when you're 29. Still, this is the kind of the age cohort that is accepted and written down in Croatia. Some important aspects from the policy overview. There is no such thing as law on youth. So there is no law that defines this limit. There is no law that defines specifics about the young people and youth policy. Only thing that we have that is on kind of national overview level, it's the national strategy or the national youth plan. The latest one was adopted in 2023 and it's lasting for 3 years until 2025. Right now, everything regarding the youth policy is under the State Office for Demography and Youth. But just a couple hours ago, or like less than an hour ago, we have had elections recently, and there is right now negotiations are lasting between several parties about the new government. And I think about an hour ago came out in unofficial in media that there will be probably a ministry for young people, although there won't be young people in the name of the ministry, because the ministry will be about demography. And that's kind of probably paints the best picture you have to have about the role that Croatia envisions for young people as a potential for demographic revitalization. So what are young people like in Croatia? Main priorities and topics that youth in Croatia mentions are quality employment, education, housing. We, as I believe many other countries in Europe, are facing with housing crisis, especially from the perspective of young people, due to super fast rise of housing costs, especially for the renting, and on the other side, the inability to have enough funds or secure a bank loan to purchase your own apartment. Another thing that's also, I would say, in trend with the rest of the Europe is the issue of mental health. Um, Silver lining is that young people in Croatia are feeling less shy to talk about the issues with the mental health, and they are willing to talk about it openly to seek the help out. Similar, so that's kind of positive things compared to the older generations. But on the other side, this now really showcases, or now it's even more visible that there is lack of support. Something we have when compared to the rest of the EU, young people in Croatia are kind of often on the different end of the spectrum. On one side, young people in Croatia are the oldest in all of the EU when it comes to leaving their parental home. Average age for young men is 34, so they're not even technically considered young. And probably the biggest or the most shocking number is this, that 78% of the people under 34 still live with their parents. On the other side, there are some data that show cases of young people in Croatia having the best numbers in EU. That's the percentage of early leavers, so people who are dropping out of the formal education. In Croatia, at least data from 2022 show that Croatia had the lowest percentage out of all of the EU, less than 2%. What is interesting, especially in the topic that we are discussing today, young people in Croatia have a high level of distrust or low level of trust in political institutions. In long-term researches, young people were asked to rate their trust in different institutions, not just political, but also media, unions, church, police, so on and so forth. The three institutions with the lowest rate of trust for young people are government of Croatia, parliament of Croatia, and political parties. This shows this probably the best statistical data we have of the level of apathy or political mistrust that young people are experiencing in Croatia. On the positive note, especially when we talk about Croatia as being the youngest member of the EU and compare it to the data coming from the Western Balkan countries or economies, is that young people in Croatia still have largely believe that democracy is the best form of rule, and also that still have positive look towards the EU accession from the Croatian perspective. So that's definitely something that is important to highlight, and it's something that we try to kind of use it as a building foundation for working with young people. So when it comes to participation, especially in the elections, in the formal institutions, in general, Croatia has a relatively low voting turnout. We have had general elections last month. We have had 62% voter turnout, which was it's not just a relatively low percentage. It was the record high for the last 25 years, compared to 4 years ago when the turnout was 47%. In that term, young people are similarly not coming out to the elections. Unfortunately, in Croatia, we do not have means of tracking actual voter turnout by the age. So there is no official data how many young people actually participated in the elections. Most of the researchers that are coming either before or after the elections showcase that young people tend to uh, participate less than other age groups, but the difference is not huge. So it's usually a couple of percentage-wise between 5 and 8% of among young people less going to the elections than older generation, except the older than 60, though their rates are pretty high. Also, in Croatia has one of the lowest rates of number of hours volunteering among young people, and one of the lowest rates of young people who participated or claim to participate in different kind of activist movements, whether it's some kind of protest, boycott, or something like that, when compared to the EU countries. On the other side, Croatia does have formal institutions that are specifically envisioned and created for young people to participate. Some of them are in schools, such as school student councils, but we also have local youth advisory councils. Um, I'm not sure about countries that we're listening today. I know some of the other countries in Europe have the practice, and it's this something that is, at least on paper, it sounds pretty good. Um, what is probably the biggest issue when it comes to apathy among young people is that they still believe that to be successful in Croatia, you have to be a member of the ruling party. They still believe that the level of corruption is really high in Croatia. And this creates the mistrust that I spoke of a bit earlier, and lack of willingness to engage. Um, and when we talk about whose fault is that and what are the opportunities to change something, on one side, there is a formal education. In Croatia, we don't have proper civic education. We have in high about politics and economy, but it's also there is a trend to remove that course from three-year schools, so vocational schools. On the other side, when we talk about the youth policy, before mentioned the documents, is we don't have the law, we have the strategic document, but that same document was non-existent between 2018 and 2023. So we have had 5 years of no strategy in Croatia. What are we doing with young people? On the other side, volunteering does not have social recognition in the society of Croatia, the same as it does in many other countries, which is also something that we believe discourages young people from participation. And finally, there is no definition in Croatia what is youth work, who are youth workers. There is no educational systems for youth workers. You cannot be officially employed as a youth worker because it's not recognized as a job description in Croatian employment system. And just as a final slide to wrap up how it all reflects in reality in the elections. So like I said, young people share with the rest of the population in Croatia levels of political apathy. What is interesting is that even when young people go out to vote, they rarely have young people to vote for. So on the elections we had a month ago, only 11% of the candidates among all parties, among all the lists, were under the age of 31. And if you remove one single populist party that gathered its candidates via TikTok and going to high schools, the number of candidates drops under 8%. And I'd like to remind you again that about 16% of population in Croatia are young people. Also, what is interesting to notice that and worrying is that not a single person under the age of 31 was elected in the parliament in the regular elections. There are still some opportunities for some of them maybe to end up due to also European elections and so on and so forth. But on the official results, there is no one under the age of 31. We expect similar numbers for the European Parliament elections, where we also have less than 11% of the candidates being young people. One exception that we have for these elections is that we have a so-called Gen Z list, or list comprised exclusively of young people. So this is something that will, at least on paper, it will make young people seem more present in the elections, the political system. So to wrap up this part about Croatia, young people in Croatia show high levels of political apathy, show distrust in political institutions, but also young people in Croatia want to have their say. In the researchers, they explicitly say they want to be involved, and they believe that especially elected politicians do not represent their interests in a proper way. So we do believe that there is a high potential to engage young people, and we can talk about it maybe a bit more later on. But we see, for example, European elections as one of the areas where we can see the biggest change since our results from the 5 years ago were really terrible on the European elections, where we had less than 30% of voter turnout. So maybe I can wrap up here, and I'm open here for questions after my colleagues present.
Thank you, Josip, for giving us an overview of the situation in Croatia. I would now like to give the floor to our next speakers, Manon Kine from Belgium. She is a student in international law and sustainable development and global justice. She is also a youth advisor for the Flemish Youth Council, and she used to be a Belgian youth representative in the United Nations. Manon, please go on.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I haven't prepared a PowerPoint, so you will just have to bear with me and go through it. I hope that's okay. But so my name is Manon, and I think one of the most important parts for me to tell you today is that I am 22. So I am still part of those young people that is often discussed and will also be discussed here, and that I'm very happy to discuss here today. And another maybe little thing to mention is that I'm Belgian, but in Belgium we have this very difficult federal system, which divides the country in three parts. And I am the representative of the Flemish Youth Council. It's the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. So most of the knowledge, most of the things I will tell you will all be from the Flemish part of Belgium. But it's nice and not so nice to recognize a lot of things with my Croatian colleague here today. In Belgium as well, a lot of political distrust is growing, not only for young people. It's a trend that's seen overall in the population, but it's also there for young people. And as the European elections will be on the 6th of June, also our federal and regional elections will be on the 6th of June. So it will be a very big election day for us. And not less than 800,000 young people will go vote for the first time. I will also be voting for the first time on the 6th of June. And 800,000 new voters will reflect in 1 out of 5 people that are voting that have never voted before. And something that really that I don't understand at all is that how if 1 out of 5 people that are voting today have never voted before and are also young, political parties still seem to not adapt their programs to young people. I often go to schools, to youth organizations, to conferences, and the thing that I hear most often of my fellow young people is that politicians talk in a lot of difficult words, and that seems to create a big distance between the young people and the politicians. They speak about themes that we don't understand in words that we don't understand, and how do you expect from us to vote for things that we don't understand and we don't know what's going on? And that's why I'm also super pleased to announce that in the European elections, 16 and 17-year-olds in Belgium will also be voting, which is a big win for youth in general, especially for Belgian youth. But they make young people, 16, 17-year-olds, start at the European level. I already have a hard time explaining to my parents what the European level does. They already have a very distant feeling, and we live like 20 minutes from Brussels, like where all the magic happens. How do you explain to 16, 70-year-olds why voting at the European elections is necessary and how it will affect your life? So we as Youth Council and I as a person are big advocates for enlarging that 16 to 17-year-old can also go vote for municipalities, for regional and for federal elections. And I often hear the question, well, why do we want 16 and 17-year-olds to vote? Like, they have no clue what's going on. And then I ask them, well, do you have a clue what's going on? And the reaction I often get is like, and that's actually the reaction I was trying to get out of them as well. Like, why would 16, 17-year-olds have more or less knowledge than a 30, than a 40, than a 50-year-old? And as the political distrust of young people and of Belgians in general is getting so much lower, actually scientific research showed that the earlier that you grasp young people and people in general as part of the democratic system, the more democratic trust they will show, and the more involvement in the political and the democratic process that they will show. And one very important thing as well is that we often feel like politicians are only making decisions for the people who will vote for them. Well, if you don't let young people vote, how will then they take us into consideration when taking new decisions? So that's an important part as well. But to make voting appealing, well, in Belgium, voting is mandatory, so we don't really have a choice. If you don't go, they say you'll get a fine. You probably won't get a fine, but it's still mandatory. So voting turnout in Belgium is always pretty big. But I feel like especially when you're going voting for the first time, having a positive feeling and having a positive experience surrounding it is very important. And when you have no clue what's going on, you just feel scared and it feels chaotic, and you're like, why am I making this decision? And two things for me are very important in that. One, making everyone in society, but especially young people, aware of the fact that your vote counts. And how is it also important? Then it's important then that politicians make you feel like your vote counts. Second one is information, more and more information, because as young people, you have a lot of grown-ups and a lot of adults make you feel like you have no clue what's going on. So it makes you a bit scared and makes you feel distant. But that's why we need information on the level of young people to make young people feel included. And I'm pretty sure actually that a lot of very old people or older people also don't understand everything that's going on in politics. But if you want young people to vote for parties that are also making choices about the retirement system, which is important that young people can also have a say in that, because it will be the same retirement system that I will be paying for the rest of my life, and that will also then pay my pension. But make it understandable, make us understand, take us into consideration, talk to us, because political party programs now are so long and you have no clue what's happening. And there's actually two parts. So they make their political party programs and they're so long and nobody really, I feel like they make it that long so that nobody will actually read them and we won't really read what they're planning to do. To then follow in the second thing is shoutings on TikTok and on political debates, so debate programs on television, so that they then can use like the few things that they really want to get out and really often make populist statements about it, or use little videos from their interventions in parliament to then show like, oh, look at us, we're doing such a great job. And it has to be better. I feel like we deserve more than politicians shouting on TikTok. I feel like we deserve more than that. And as we are really trying very hard to make the world a better place, I feel like the politicians that we elected, we trust with our votes, and they are trusting us to go vote. We deserve more than that. And we deserve more than them arguing on Twitter. We deserve more than them just spending in Belgium, I think, 230 days to form a government. We deserve more, because more of us is expected, but then we can expect more from them as well. And the last shout out that I wanted to give to my little country of Belgium, and especially Flanders, is one, the fact that youth participation is embedded in the law. So we as a Flemish Youth Council, I was one of the 8 people that got elected in October. We have a mandate of 3 years. I got elected by young people from all over the country. And youth participation is embedded in a law that makes the Flemish government make them, the law makes them listen to us. So if any decision they want to make about young people, they have to ask our advice about it, and then we will write an advice and send it to them. Does it mean that they always listen to it? No, of course not. But for example, if it's not followed up upon, opposition leaders or parties can use it in political debates and be like, why did you not follow the advice of the Flemish Youth Council about it? Because they used so many voices of so many young people, and why is it not followed up upon? The second really, really big part, and actually the thing I think I'm most proud of Flanders, is the fact that we have a super well embedded youth work. At the Youth Council already, there's 100 organizations linked to us, and youth work is really what I grew up in, and what I think a lot of other Flemish young people grew up on. But only 1% or 0.1% of the Flemish budget goes to youth work, but they expect 1 million young people to learn everything there, and they put the hard weight of, for example, mental health issues on the youth workers. And but maybe the youth workers, as they're so close to youngsters, they can help out on this. And then if it's about elections, maybe youth work can help about it. And every problem, it always gets pushed to schools or to youth work. And yes, youth work is very close to young people, but no, 0.1% of the budget is not enough to cater all of that help for all of that young people. So we'd like to finish up by one, calling for lowering the voting age everywhere for every level of political elections. To give a big shout out to youth work in general, the ones that get recognized, and also the ones especially that don't get recognized, but have a big call for budgeting and empowering them, because you cannot expect so much of them without empowering them. And 3 is not making choices about young people without young people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mano. I think that was quite a nice and positive, optimistic view. And now I will give the opportunity to our third speaker, Tarik Delkovic from Denmark, to say a few words himself. He is a political science student at the University of Southern Denmark, where he serves as an EU Careers Student Ambassador. He is also the Danish youth delegate to the Council of Europe's Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, and he is a student assistant at a Danish NGO, DEO, where he works on youth projects. So, Tarik, here you go.
Thank you very much, Christian. It always feels nice when someone reads your CV or stuff from your CV out like this, you know. But no, I also want quickly to mention before I start that I am 24 years old, so I'm a bit older than my Belgian colleague and a bit younger than my Croatian colleagues. But I think the most important thing is that we all feel young by soul, because there should be no age limit to when you are a young individual. But firstly, I would like to talk about why youth participation in general is important, not just when it comes to the upcoming elections for the European Parliament, but for European democracy as a whole. We often celebrate the growth of the democracy, which, get me right, is also very important. But we also need to confront the current storms. And there are many storms in the world right now. There's a terrible aggression of the Russian Federation on Ukraine. There are atrocities being committed in the Middle East. There are autocratic regimes all over the world and also in Europe. And when you look at it in that way, I, as a young person, ask myself, can European and local democracy, which is the bedrock of citizen engagement, weather those storms? I personally believe yes, but only if we build upon this remarkable foundation that was already started in Europe. I therefore also believe that youth participation is important, and that we as young people are also responsible for making sure that this foundation or this soul of democracy is remaining strong. Because when you're looking at a human body, the soul isn't enough, or the foundation isn't enough. So citizen engagement and especially youth participation, which is the lifeblood of that democracy, which brings together the soul and the body, needs to be strong. So young people should be informed and active architects of their communities, because we as young people are the guardians of those ideals and traditions that keeps our democracy strong. And this is where I personally stand as a young person. Initiatives just like this one are a critical catalyst, because they essentially equip young people with tools and platforms to have their voices heard, and where they can be informed about their rights and opportunities. These things are more than just initiatives. It's a promise to the future, a sort of a contract, if you will. Initiatives, like these and many others ensure a thriving democracy for generations, not just for mine or not just for my colleagues from Croatia and Belgium, but for generations and generations to come. But the work, of course, is far from over. Initiatives to increase youth participation must reach every corner of Europe, which is also why I'm very happy to see this partnership between Denmark, Belgium, and Croatia. With the upcoming elections, we stand at the dawn of a new era. And together, I believe that we can build a continent where every voice is heard and where every community thrives, and where the flame of this democracy burns ever brighter. But even though this kind of may sound like utopia, I believe that this utopia we believe in must be true. So I believe that we should rise to this challenge, because the future depends on it. But what does the situation on youth participation look like in Denmark? If we start by looking at the yearly democracy survey, which is made by the Danish Youth Council, it reveals that more than 50% are actually dealing with low democratic confidence. More specifically, 53% of Denmark's youth feel insufficiently informed to engage in political conversations with their peers and with family members. And they feel like they lack basic understanding of various political topics and issues. And to me personally, this number should and must be higher. And this is something that should be addressed as well. The most concerning part is the development. We have seen an increase in the number of people with low democratic confidence. In 2020, the same survey was done, where 47% reported that they were dealing with low democratic confidence, compared to 53% last year, which I personally find concerning. Not only because young people are the future, but we are also the present. I often hear people saying how young people are the future, but they kind of tend to forget that we're also the present. I mean, we are basically right here, right? So to address this, we need to increase the involvement of youth in European democracy, because we, the youth, are often forgotten. The EU and European politics are generally not something that there's a lot of information about in Denmark, if you ask me, not even in the school system. And this leads to one of the main sources of information being available through civil society organizations and activities happening outside of the classroom. It is therefore also important that we try to engage young people in order to increase the involvement of youth. Because to me, it also seems that young people are not even informed about their opportunities to be engaged. From my experience, when I have been all around the entire country to talk with young people about different topics, they all tend to have an opinion when you ask them. Some of them are maybe just not really aware of this. I therefore strongly believe that in order to include young people more and to ensure that their voices are heard, we need to encourage them to take their first steps sometimes. Not because they're not capable of thinking or making decisions, but because they are sometimes, as I said, not even aware of how simple it can be to have an opinion about something. So in order to increase youth participation, I believe that we should focus on three main topics: education, awareness, technology and social media, and lastly, youth representation. First, education and awareness are the cornerstones of a thriving democracy. We must ensure that every young person understands the fundamental principles of democracy and their rights. By integrating civic education into our school systems and organizing informative campaigns and workshops, we can equip the youth with the knowledge and the tools they need to become informed and engaged citizens. Besides this, there should be a more emphasis on the EU and questions related to European politics, at least in Denmark, since I can't really tell how this is in other countries such as in Belgium or Croatia. Secondly, I believe that in an age where technology is becoming more and more important, we must use its powers and its opportunities to amplify youth voices. Social media and online platforms provide unique opportunities for dialogue, for debate, and mobilization, and there should therefore be more focus on creating interactive spaces where young people can express their opinions and connect with like-minded individuals and contribute to the democratic discourse. By embracing this technology, we can break down the barriers to participation and ensure that no voice goes unheard. Again, as I mentioned before, this may sound like utopia, but I strongly believe in it. And just this morning, I read the new democracy analysis actually made by the Danish Youth Council, where 35% of the young people answered that they want more information about the EU on social media and on social platforms in general, while 33% answered that they would like to learn more about the EU in the school systems. Lastly, something that means a lot to me personally as the Danish youth delegate to the Council of Europe's Congress of Local and Regional Authorities is youth representation. Youth representation is actually essential for the legitimacy and effectiveness of our democratic institutions. Society should and must strive to increase the presence of young people in the decision-making bodies at all levels of government. Whether through reserved seats or youth councils or programs such as the Rejuvenating Politics in the Council of Europe, we must create pathways for young leaders to rise and to shape the future of our continent. Because true democracy demands diverse perspectives and inclusive participation. This goes for all levels of government, also local democracy, as local democracy can be a gateway into politics for young people, and it is therefore a force of freedom that uplifts our democracy as a whole. So I would therefore like to finish this by saying that the most important thing is to give young people a platform, a chance to make their voice heard, and for society to put more trust into young people. And this goes both for decision making, but also to increase the involvement of youth in European democracy, because as I mentioned earlier, the future really depends on it. Thank you very much. That was all I had.
Thank you, Tariq, and thank you for your messages. We will start now with the Q&A part of the session. So if anybody would like to ask a question or wants to comment on something, please either raise your hand or type in the chat. And in the meantime, while the participants are thinking about questions, maybe I can fill up the time and ask one myself. So how do you think we have heard different perspectives here, and we have heard some of the things that you find important to engage with youth, such as social media and communicating with them. But how can we maximize this approach? How can we use it to get even to those young people who are not maybe engaged in activities such as this? How can we reach those, for instance, in the rural communities or the similar situations? Does anybody want to maybe try first? Okay, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I would necessarily advocate, but we can see examples of, to recognize that young people are present, especially even more than compared with the other generations on social media. And that's not necessarily something bad. Why not use social media also as a tools for sharing information, for combating disinformation, for providing access to different thoughts and opinions. We can see that social media can be used also as a political activation tool. We can see it now. I mean, probably in the political terms, probably the most famous one is the Taylor Swift calling out for her Swifties to register for vote in United States last year, which broke the record for the most young people that registered in one day. And it's superficial example, but it shows that there is a huge potential in reaching out. I can see that European Parliament also kind of recognized that. They partnered with some companies, but also I can see it on the national level where they are collaborating with different kind of influencers and stuff like that. And that can definitely be one way to reach out, especially for people that it's maybe harder to reach through the regular institutions. And on the other side, and I think that's something that we also have experience in Croatian Youth Network is work on the field. There is the solution is definitely not in a centralized approach, but in decentralized and especially individualistic approach, maybe not one by one, but in a sense that you cannot have the same messages and same ideas for young people who are living in a capital, in urban area, and for young people who are living on an island that's empty outside of the touristic season. In that sense, that is definitely something that political parties are struggling with to address. We have had recently in Croatia a great example from one of the journalists who did cover of all over the Croatia, and where you can see, and she spoke with young people, and you can see in their interviews that the young people are like, okay, but as a young person living in a small village, the messages that the political elites are saying are not in any way relevant to me. But it's also something that's not just for the political elites; it's also for us as an NGOs, as people who are working in the research institutions to reshape what we are trying to say, and to not take social media as something that's automatically bad or superficial. Instead, see how we can use it as a benefit or as an adding tool.
Thank you, Josip. Manon, do you want to maybe add something to this? Have you had some
Yes, another
experience?
thing I would maybe like to add to it is in Belgium, we don't have big rural areas that are really far to reach. We're quite small and quite full with housing and people, but there are a lot of groups of young people that are harder to reach. The ones we always seem to reach the easiest are the ones doing I think Tarek can agree on me, as we are both international youth delegates, are always the law students and the political science students. And they're always the most interested ones. And then you go further to the people, the university students, the college students, or the students in high schools that have that have rich parents, or that have like an easy the easier lives. I'm also one of those. So it's really not a shame or anything to anyone. I just think that we can never forget about the other groups of young people that are harder to reach while advocating for youth policy, because young people are a very heteronomous group, and there's a lot of us living in very different conditions. And when you try to advocate for youth participation, you have to try to get as many young people as possible. And something we do very often is working together with youth organizations that already work with young people that have that are sometimes harder to reach, and that way they already have this confidence relationship with the youth workers or with that organization, that we can go maybe visit them, ask them some questions. What do you want? What do you think about it? So the groups that are harder to reach are often easier to reach through a place that they're already comfortable at and people they're already comfortable around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mano. Tariq, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I can add something. I really agree with what Josip said earlier about how we kind of have to kind of find a way to engage everyone. You know, I would say that there should be easily accessible information about let's say the EU now, for example, in general, because it is important that we communicate with young people about things that they find interesting and is relevant for them. So we have to shape the way we communicate and how we talk with young people. And then I would also add that I think that there should be more focus on engaging young people at their educational institutions, because this is where you have the chance to speak to the biggest amount of young people, and also that can be both urban and rural areas. So that would be something I would like to add to the point that Josip made earlier.
Okay, thank you, Tariq. So you can all agree that it's important to reach different subgroups of youth who live in different areas, have different life experiences, and so on. And there has been a lot of discussion within the EU lately about reducing the voting age to 16 or 17 years. Several countries have already done so. One of them is Belgium, which we have heard a bit about. But what are your opinions on this? Should the EU member states go ahead with lowering the voting ages, or what are the positive sides? What are maybe some arguments for or against? Manon, would you like to start?
I think I elaborated already a bit on it, but I think that it's super important to include young people, also in decision making through voting. I also maybe want to restate the scientific studies that prove that the earlier that you make young people vote, the more confidence they will show in the democratic system and the more involved they will feel. And the fact that politicians are often, it's hard to ignore making choices for the ones that can re-elect them. So if we want them to listen to us, it will be way easier if they are able to vote them in or out of parliament during the next elections. Maybe something that I haven't fully touched upon yet is the fact that in Belgium, you leave. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to sneeze. Okay, I'm so sorry for everyone that's wearing headphones if I'm sneezing. So that in Belgium you leave school at 18, and the normal voting age is 18. So there isn't really a lot about political parties or about elections in the in formal education in high school. If you lower that voting age to 16, schools and education really won't have any other option than to include political choices and political parties and the political systems in education, and it will also make young people feel way more informed. So I think that's the few things about lowering the voting age that I found important to highlight.
Okay, thank you, Mano. Tariq, would you like to? I think you haven't mentioned it so far. So maybe you're...
Yes, I can talk about. I think personally, it's a good idea to include people from the age of 16, especially because now, as I mentioned earlier, I read the analysis, the democracy analysis from the Danish Youth Council this morning, and it actually said that 56% of the 16 to 17 years olds actually they do have an opinion about how we should shape our societies. And also I believe that it's important as the development of a young person. It's the same with sports. If you do sports from a very young age, you get used to being active, and that transitions to your older life. And the same will happen with voting. If you get used to vote at the age of 16 and 17 already, there's a big chance that you will continue doing this for the rest of your life. So I think it's important to include the 16 and 17 years old as well, because it can increase the democratic participation in society in general.
Okay, thank you. And Josip, would you like to maybe say something about this?
Yeah, I mean, we also as our organization are supporting, and we're going to push for it in Croatia, that we lower the voting age. And yeah, not to repeat what was already said, one of the things that we will use is that on one side, when you talk about education, young people are even earlier kind of have to make big decisions. In Croatia, that's choosing their high school, which can highly affect what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I think choosing who's gonna go to the European Parliament for a couple of years is less important than what your job is going to be. And on the other side, in Croatia, I know in some other countries, I don't know explicitly for Belgium and Denmark, but in Croatia, you are legally allowed to work with 16 with your parental consent. So, and there are not many people in Croatia, but there are some who are working as a 17-year-olds, and they are paying taxes because they're employed, and they do not have right to vote, which is something that's, American Revolution was started because people were paying taxes, didn't have a right to vote. And final and from my personal perspective, the most important reason for lowering the voting age is that when we talk about the climate change and what we are doing to our planet, uh, nowadays, these last couple of years and this couple of next years are going to be the crucial years when we decide what are we doing as a society, as a humanity. But consequences of our actions or inactions will be felt mostly by the people in next 30, 40, 50 years. And we have to give opportunity for those kind of decisions to as young people as possible, because they are the ones that have to live for the longest for those consequences. If someone is a 60-year-old, they probably do not care how the world will gonna look like in 2070. But if you're 16, you're probably going to care how the world looks like in 30, 40 years. And in that sense, I think it's hypocritical to not involve the young people in such a big decisions and purposely close the doors for them.
Thank you, Josip, for this strong message in the end. Maybe Mano or Tariq, would you like to reply something on this? Or regarding the youth participation, such important topics as you have mentioned, like climate change and so on, there is a lot of misinformation today in today's media space, and including social media. We have a lot of maybe negative presences, influential people. We have a lot of how to say, maybe conspiracy theories or some political views that are not really true, that are not really in line with some common fundamental values. How can we fight this? How can we stop young people from being manipulated by such maybe malign sources? Tariq, maybe would you like to start?
I can try to give my point. Yeah, it's of course very hard to answer this question, and it's going to be very, very hard to prevent misinformation and conspiracy theories in general. But I think that we can work towards securing a more critical thinking among young people through active citizenship, especially. We need to empower students and young people in general to engage in civic activities such as volunteering and participating in local governance, for example, to help them understand their rights and responsibilities as citizens in order to think and to be able to reflect constructively in order to be able to see both sides of a story, you know, and be able to take informed decisions as well.
Thank you, Tariq. Manon, maybe did I see you raise a hand or?
I think one other important thing is, okay, children and young people have to be strengthened against those fake news and have to be learned about looking more critical at things. But I feel like the real responsibility should not be laid on the young people, but should be laid on the people spreading that misinformation, those grown up adults spending their time on misleading young people, and the responsibility that lays on that. And I feel like we just, as a society, agreed on the fact that fake news will forever be a thing, and are never really looking with a responsible eye on that. And I feel like I have a really hard time understanding why people do it. And I know I will not be able to get it out of the way or something, but I feel like making a big point about its responsibility and about people not spreading fake news other than solely adding on the fact that you should be critical regarding that is a very important part of it.
Thank you. I think it's a really interesting perspective. Josip, would you like to maybe add something or fill us in?
Yeah, just two sentences. One, of course, the education and the school systems that should get closer to the 21st century. And the other part is also think how we talk with the young people. One of the key things that populists do not do is condescend or talk to young people as they do not understand anything. And that's unfortunately, especially when we talk about politicians, something that can often be heard in that popular phrase, you're too young, you will understand that with years, you will understand it with experience, and so on and so forth. And that's definitely those kind of messages tend to push young people away. So if you talk about from the political standpoint of view, definitely political parties should take care more how do they talk to young people, but also with young people. Start, answering more questions instead of, just providing explanations and stuff like that. So I think that would make a big difference because, for example, in Croatia, research shows that as much as young people do not trust long-standing political parties, at the same time, they do not show tendencies to go or to position themselves as either far right or far left. When they have to position themselves, on the classic political scale from 1 to 10, radical left, radical right, most of them tend to position themselves in the middle between 4, 5, 6, and stuff like that. And they kind of reflect the same as older generations. But the biggest difference is that they do not trust the traditional parties, and that's definitely have something to do with the way they talk with young people.
All right, so one of the key takeaways that we can learn maybe is the key in approaching youth is the way we communicate with them, to treat them maybe as stronger participants in the political life because of the issues the politicians are deciding on are theirs as well. Thank you all for your participation and for your opinions. I will wrap this up now. Especially thank you to Josip, Mano, and Tarik for being our speakers today. Thank you for everyone who joined and listened to us. And hopefully we have learned something new and we can keep some optimism for the future with our youth and just give them a chance to say their voices. Thank you all and goodbye.
Thanks for the invitation. Take care.
Bye. Goodbye.